Welcome to Stories for a Better Life. So I've been really struggling with trying to articulate um, what exactly the topic is, and on my phone, everything's failing. But we'll just let this go for a second because my computer just is blowing up here. Um, so, but so I want to start off with a story. So there was this one time I was interviewed by and this is about stories, the difference between stories for courage and stories for helping others understand our situation, um, and that they're not always the same. So this guy interviewed me one time from Access Press, and his name was Tim, and I can't remember his last name, but he was blind. Okay, and I met him at the Marsh in their cafe, and I was late, which was not an easy thing for a guy who's blind in a place where the sounds are everywhere. Okay. And he proceeds to interview me about, I can't remember, it might have been about yoga, might have been something else. And he makes this comment to me that he couldn't really do yoga because he couldn't see the poses. Okay. And I remember, like, started talking to him, and it turned out that back when he was in high school, he was blind his whole life. He actually was on the wrestling team. And 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 I was kind of like, dude, really? Like, and whatever his motivations were to be on the wrestling team as a blind person, we're talking about right across from each other. You can't see what's coming at you. I try to imagine that for a second. And he said, yeah, I ended up, I want to do something. I ended up getting, and he made this great like comment. I didn't lose every match. Right? Like, it didn't matter how many he won. He said, I didn't lose every match. And I'm sitting there thinking, and I'm asking because of course I'm curious about everything. Right. And I'm going like, well, how the hell? Because I live with a disability too, I'm not afraid to ask questions, right? Because you're my homies, I'm your homies. We get to ask each other and share things, right? And I remember I go, so how the hell did you figure out how to do this? And how to even win a match? And he said, well, I got to where when I was just across from the guy, I could feel it coming. And I wasn't always right, but I could kind of tell enough. And there were times when I could kind of see it before it happened and all these things. And then a couple times he translated into he wrestled for Southwest, I think. And because a couple times I kind of figured, you know, so it was good. I liked it. It was very empowering to be able to be a wrestler. And so I remember thinking about that he, and he kind of gave the hint that he wanted to do something and he wasn't going to be stopped by his disability, like kind of the overcoming story. I'm going to go over this obstacle and become a wrestler. But I was stuck by the juxtaposition between that and him not thinking he could do yoga. And I remember talking to him going, okay, so just so you know, I think that your blindness probably makes you the best yoga student I've ever encountered, because you're taking all of your senses, not the obvious ones, and you're sensing and feeling. Your whole life to this point as a person without sight has been a yoga practice. And you've got abilities here that not only make you a yoga student, but they're remarkable. This was a story where the way he represented being the wrestler and what it meant needed to evolve. And he didn't become a yoga student, but it was an example of watching someone have one story for courage to get him to be a wrestler, which I can't even imagine how hard that was, right? and then and then him not realizing what he knew. I feel that the people on this call and what we're trying to accomplish here with our MBS adaptive yoga community and with yoga disability and transformation is to recognize what we actually know and be able to tell stories about it. So he had an overcoming story of what made him become a wrestler. It's like, wait, that story's got a lot of stuff in it, right? And you haven't fully gotten it. So that's one example of what I'm talking about. And I don't know about you, but if I'm being honest and all things being equal, I'm not sure I would choose to have a disability, an ongoing medical condition. Did you are you all there? It looks like everyone froze. Are you with me right now?
Yes, we're
Oh
here.
no.
No, we're here.
Can you hear me? Because you all froze for me.
You sound great.
Okay, I'll just keep talking.
Yep.
And like, okay. That all things being equal, I just it's hard. And the one of the reasons why I like about these discussions and also
Well, we spoke too soon.
am I back?
Yes.
Boy, this is going to be an easy one. I hope everyone, you have no idea the decimal volume of the F bombs that just started in my house. Okay, so, all right. So, what's going to have to probably happen here is this discussion has to get going faster than me. Someone else may have to step in and teach the class. Like, what the hell at the end? Like, it's all still out. So, all things being equal, I'd probably choose not to have the ongoing medical issues and what it's been to be a disability, but there's been a secret side. The part, and this is why I like being around all of you, right? I mean, that I know that all of you, deep down where nobody sees, right, know a certain kind of struggle that and resilience that has to form through living with a condition or a disability. And this is what I hope that both this group and Team Adaptables continues to learn how to meet at this level. There's a great line from Parker Palmer: listen to each other into speech. Learning to listen someone into speech is really a powerful thing. And somebody like, if I break out again, because I didn't know I went off last time, am I still with people here? Can you hear me? Okay. When I go thumbs up, I'm asking if I'm still connected, right? So someone nod when I go thumbs up. Okay. All right. So this is part of what I hope that the discussion, the things that we know and the way, I don't think a person with disability just needs to think that their life has taught them resilience. And that's also part of my intent with all of this, is that something's happened, some sort of strange magic within the human condition has happened when you live with what we're all living on this level that doesn't quite have words. And so, and the transition of those types of stories or the things you say to yourself, which you may not even know. What I'm going to try to do in a second is share some of my strange ones that I had to think about for this one, right? And they're only of limited interest to an audience, not just to you, but to even your family, right? They don't quite, they have some limitations, right? Of course, now I didn't turn on airplane mode, so I'm getting a phone call, and so I can't see anybody. This will get better, I swear to God. All right, so I'm gonna keep talking like I'm in a vacuum. So, can someone say back to me what I just said?
You said
Is anyone there?
you said you were getting a phone call, but you were just going to keep talking.
Yeah, yeah, no, I know, but right before the content part, because I lost my train of thought when my doctor
You're
just called,
talking about
right?
how you have stories that you wanted to share
Oh
that
yeah,
aren't
yeah, yeah,
always
yeah. Okay,
interesting to
thanks.
other.
Thank you. Yeah, and what I want us to try to think here is share some of the transition between the things that keep you going each day, not just your will, right? Because in a way, one of the things, some of the stories I had to get through my stuff and then go into, trying to share it are stories that weren't necessarily great ones, like kind of what I feel doesn't matter, right? There are things that I told internally, right, that are weren't the best stories, right? But they're also the stories that I needed to be able to then tell stories to the world. I need, let's say, right, waking, right? Those aren't the same stories. But what you heard in waking are not the stories I needed for courage, right? Like, and that's a really important transition, right? In those things. Okay, so here are a couple of mine, and then I don't know who's on the call, but I'm gonna call on a couple people to start the ball rolling. But so, what your story, and you might not even know, they're not necessarily crisp, exact stories, right? And it might be a time in your life, it might be an insight, it might be an encounter. For me, if you know me at all, they're often tied to music and songs, because songs and music bring me back to different times in my life, right? So here's one you can tell where I was when I'm beginning to develop stories for courage. It's before I've started yoga. And but I'm studying philosophy and I'm kind of thinking the world is deeply effed up. This is during the Reagan era, right? This is like a whole bunch of crap going on in our culture. And I'm seeing it hollowing out and I'm beginning to think. And I really get affected by Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. So You Think You Can Tell, Heaven from Hell, Blue Skies from Pain. Can you tell a green field from a cold steel rail? A smile from a veil. Do you think you can tell? Right? And I remember this was the beginning of me willing to be an explorer. That what I had been handed, and I'm going to talk to you about another song in a second. What I had been handed was a world that didn't make sense, that made me sit in too much pain, right? And where relief was, right, wasn't where I was looking, right? Like I was thinking that no, it's got to be a blue sky, and then really, does the cold steel rail maybe have more in it than I thought? And did someone tell me what was blue sky and what was rail when it came to my body? The answer is yes. Did I follow? Yes. Was it partially right? Yeah, disability, living with a disability sucks. Yes. Are you sure there isn't more? No. Starts the explorer. Okay. I start wearing, as I in graduate school studying philosophy, thinking about the mind body relationship. I start wearing, I start buying all sorts of wolf t-shirts, right? Like all over and no one knows it. I've got wolf, every t-shirt I'm wearing when I'm starting my yoga practice is a wolf on it. And I don't necessarily want everyone to know how much I wear wolf t-shirts, but I'm in California. So although they can see that I'm wearing wolf t-shirts all the time, they don't know what it means. They don't know. And I'm not trying to be that. And I realize there's a wolf that I used to, in a pack that I used to think and have lots of connection to, which was the scouting wolf, right? Not the alpha, not the all the things that are going in for reproduction, but the one that runs out around the pack and scouts new territory and sniffs for new food and stuff. And so I got really connected to the scouting wolf in a pack, right? As courage, okay? As like, okay, I'm going to start on this journey, right? And then finally, and so no, we're getting too far. I would like to talk about this for all day because I'm remembering stories now and things that I did for courage when I was starting yoga, but I'll try to hurry this up. So I'm practicing yoga a lot. I mean, the start of Mind Body Solutions is an extraordinary amount of yoga practice alone in a house in Santa Barbara, right? And I have trouble as I'm trying to like work with my body and my paralysis and all the things that come with it. I have trouble hearing too much silence in the room, right? Because my legs feel dead and I'm not sure. I don't want it to get heavy. So I'm constantly listening to music all the time, right? When I'm practicing. And we're talking like anywhere from 3 to 6 hours a day, right? And I get really connected to an album that I think is wildly underrated, which is Zeropa by U2. You don't know, I'm a huge Dave Matthews fan. I'm a huge U2 fan. I'm a huge Talking Heads fan. Right? Zeropa like has these lyrics, and I just went through them again this morning, like being amazed by them. Right? I have no compass. I have no maps. I have no reasons to get by. And I have no religion, and I don't know what's what, and I don't know the limits of what we got, right? My disability. I don't know its limits, right? Don't worry, it's gonna be all right. You have the right shoes to get you through the night. I had to like, as I'm in that place, I'm having to make sure I have the right shoes, right? Then trust that you have the resilience to get through what you're doing. You do have the right shoes, right? Um, it's it's cold outside, but brightly lit. Skip the subway. Let's go to the overground. Get your head out of the mud, baby. Right? And my life's a lie because your stories don't always have to be true. I always thought the line was there's flowers in the mud, baby, overground. It's actually, I found out today, it's put flowers in the mud, baby, overground. My journey was taking me to darker places, and I wanted to, and that's why I think I heard there's flowers. Like there's going to be flowers if I can get out of the mud. There's going to be flowers overground, right? And I kind of feel all of you are kind of the flowers, right? My yoga practice was kind of the flowers. Actually, when you commit to this type of process, there's come flowers will come. It may take a long time. And then a couple more lines. It's going to be all right. Uncertainty can be your guiding light. Like if I had tried to think I knew what the hell was going on, never would have happened, right? There's no particular place names, no particular songs. I've been hiding. What am I hiding from? Right? And this is a story when he's talking about stories for courage. This is a story that there's a part when you're trying to figure out what the things actual things you need to have courage with to find your voice are not necessarily the things you think. And then finally the song ends. She's gonna dream the world she wants to live in. She's gonna dream out loud. Right? Like I was gonna create more potential in the mind-body relationship, right? Without trying to overcome my body. Unfortunately, I ended up breaking my leg because I still use too much will, right? So here's an example. And however you get, and those are extreme examples, and I was on this weird path. You have stories too, and they're crucial stories that give you courage. You don't need to know why they make sense. Those stories don't have to line up. They don't even like the example of I always thought there's flowers in the mud, baby. Instead of put, they don't always even have to be true. They can have things that that aren't exactly true. But that level of finding confidence, and what I found not effective was to find my confidence through yelling louder at the people at the medical model, right? That my confidence, I didn't want to just be put in the position of complaint by the master gaze, by the gaze of what the limitations were of my body, right? There's a lot more lines in the Pink Floyd song about being put into a cage. I think we've been put into a cage when it comes to the mind-body relationship. I don't just want to break the bars. All right. So is Laura Halsey on the call?
Yep.
But first, I'm going to go to Katja. Katja. So she's getting the Fast and Furious rush. I don't know. I can't see who's on the call. So Katja, so she's living her life. She's a scientist. She's whatever. And suddenly, I heard this story yesterday. If you're on Team Adaptables, you heard it too. Suddenly, she decides to start lifting weights. So Katja, like what went in, and they don't have to be all dressed up into its full meaning, because you discover the meaning of your own stories. You don't know them in your head right now. You discover them. So talk a little bit about, and just sort of give her a little context. She holds the record in her age group for bench pressing in the state of Colorado. So just know that that's the frame here. Katja, talk about what the story that you tell everyone about that, and then what was underneath that motivation.
Ooh, that's
How's that for putting you on the spot?
yeah,
Right.
that's very put on the spot-ish.
And
This,
every answer you have now is okay, right? That's the thing about these stories,
it's good to know.
right?
It's good to know.
Yeah.
The story I tell everyone is I was diagnosed with MS, and you know, my life is going downhill, right? Where is this going to wind up? I'm only 34 years old. I mean, like, there's boatloads of life left, and what's going to happen? And I'm married to a guy who is all about physical activity. He is Mr. Marathon, Mr. Triathlon, way before that stuff was cool. And whatever your problem is, you can outrun it. Was sort of his theory of life. And so what am I going to do? I mean, I hate running. Even when I was able-bodied, I hated running. And at some point, I just decided, well, what I have to do is get strong. And I contacted the train. In fact, I contacted so many trainers, and I said, I want to learn how to lift weights, but I've got MS. You want to take me on? And literally only one person responded, even answered, as opposed to, oh yeah, I don't think really I'm the right person for you, or this isn't really in my skill set, or whatever. No, literally one person replied, and so he became my trainer, and that was fantastic. And what was sort of hilarious was, I get there and he's like, well, what are your goals? What are your goals? And I just looked at him like, what? And he says, well,
yeah,
are there
1 second.
Are there things in your life, that you want to accomplish that you can't accomplish because you don't have the strength? And I said, how when you boil the water for coffee in the morning, I make filter coffee, where you just pour the water over the coffee grounds in the filter. I said, it's really hard to pick up that kettle and tip it and pour. And he's like, okay. And so that was my. I thought that was just the stupidest thing I could have said. I mean,
It's brilliant. It's brilliant.
What I really wanted was to be able to get in and out of bed. I really wanted to be able to go to the bathroom, without it being the major physical exertion of my day.
But this would be a perfect example of the contrast between the two levels of story,
Yeah,
right?
and I
Right. The
hadn't
story
realized
you
that.
tell outwardly and, about being able to do that, and it's consistent with the other part you don't want to share, right?
Right,
Yeah, keep going. It's a
right.
perfect example of what we're
And I
talking about.
hadn't even thought of that till this minute.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
thank you. And so, like told everybody the other day, I the little pink weights in the gym, little pink weights are about 3 pounds. I could not curl one of those little pink weights. And so he says, that's cool, go home and curl soup cans. Soup cans are 12 ounces. They're not even a pound. Um, and I don't know, a couple of months later, one of the great things about weightlifting, and I recommend it to everybody, is that especially if you don't lift anything, if you're deconditioned, and even if you have a slow adaptation rate, as people with MS do, the initial gains are tremendous, and so it's very reinforcing. It's very validating. A couple
Yeah.
months later, he says to me, he says, "So how's the coffee? How's the picking up that boiling water kettle?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's super easy now, thanks."
And it means everything else.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so the motivations was to make improvements in your life, right? But um, is there anything that had to do with why it was weightlifting? It was just like a strength thing.
That's a really good question.
Hmm. And you don't have to know these answers, right? I
The
mean,
sort
not just you, but anybody. You know.
of, like standard traditional answer would be that when it comes to picking a physical activity to do, the same thing's not right for everyone. Running is not the answer for everyone. And even before my disability, and even before I did uh, any kind of organized activity, I always like moving a piano across a room. I mean, anything that just involved, slow, steady application of strength was more my jam than things that were fast.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and many and more, when you talk to athletes, and I also row and I do wheelchair racing, so I do talk to a lot of athletes. Um, Most people hate strength training, right? It's something they know they have to do for their sport, but
Hmm.
for whatever reason, and I don't know if it's physiological or mental or both, I love picking up heavy things and putting them down.
That's so great. I mean, like, and just so you know, just to give context to that last utterance, I hate putting her on the spot. I said I wasn't going to do this, but she is a rocket scientist and has worked for NASA. So apparently she likes to lift heavy things, both mentally and physically, right? So it's one of those things that's part of her nature. So in the transit, what do you think kept you going once you started? Obviously, the results. Was that enough to keep
N-
you going?
Not initially, no, and that's one of the reasons why I did work with a trainer. I thought, oh, I'll work with a trainer for a month or 2 months, and then I'll know how to do it, and I won't have this extra expense and stuff. But it turned out that knowing that someone was waiting for me to show up was really important to me.
Okay, like, so say that utterance again.
Knowing that someone else was waiting for me to show up for whatever reason, in this case, because I'm paying him to be there, um, turned out to be really important to me. And learning that was also really important because it helped me structure things that I wanted to accomplish in a way that meant that somebody was waiting for me to show up, whether I was teaching a class or taking a class, or that works really well for me. It's not the way it works for everybody.
Yeah, I just want to say, because I'm always listening on multiple levels, like what a great signpost for the MBS community, right? What if we could provide for each other that person that's waiting for you to show up? Right? And the good news is you don't, we'll do this most likely, as much as we can for free, but it's like that kind of company, that kind of structure creates the freedom that you found, right? I mean, like that's part of what, and then the weightlifting proves its own. I hope you're not moving pianos, but maybe you are, right? Maybe
Occasionally.
that's your goal. Occasionally still moving pianos. See, that's awesome. And yeah, so do you have anything else you want to say about that? I just actually, so if you were on the meeting yesterday, we didn't hear all that part of the story. So now I'm more tickled even more, and I've got 40 more questions, but we should keep finding different stories. But let's maybe if we have some after hours, I'm curious about a lot of that process. These are good examples. How did it help you though? One last question professionally. How did the weightlifting help you? Did it have any manifestation in your ability, not just to crunch numbers in high level mathematics, but did it end up how has weightlifting translated into your work dynamic?
And this is not specific to the kind of work I do, but as I'm sure a lot of you have experienced, and it took me a long time to recognize this, there's a lot of ways we're marginalized. I'm a woman in a very technical field, predominantly male. I'm an older woman at this point in a field full of young hotshot programmers. I'm disabled. But I always had that sort of knowledge in my back pocket, that I can do something that you guys probably don't even suspect that I can do. Right? The breaking that stereotype of who you maybe think I am. I don't know that you think that. And one of the things that disability has taught me is that people are not thinking about you nearly as much as you think they are. People are seriously obsessed with their own selves.
They're narcissistic, but there would be a tremendous, very practical, functional story of courage that you've employed your whole life. It sounds like that you can do something that people around you don't fully expect, right? Like that's a really functional, and to know that you can actually do it, and success may look all different things, right? And so that's one of those like quiet little phrases that has tremendous force over your life. So Laura, you're on the call, right? Still, I can't see anyone again because of course I'm getting more spam calls than you can imagine. So
okay.
I was talking to Laura a little bit about this yesterday, and there's strength of going out and doing and doing that. And then there's also, and this is was a really interesting, and I want Laura to set the story this way. Set another frame of the dimension of the story. Laura, you were talking about the strength to not participate and the stories there.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that, because now we're coming at the same type of you think, oh, it's all about doing. Sometimes the strength of disability and the realization of disability makes you realize a whole other kind of strength. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I guess because we were doing in the team adaptables, and you've been talking about what's your superpower, and what are the things skills that are honed when you have a disability, or if you have one for a very long time or whatever. And so one of the things that I never really thought about until recently is that I was born with this disability, so I had it all through school and everything. And sometimes there was a lot of times when I couldn't partake in things, or my parents would have to say, look, Laura, you can't go to this thing or whatever. And I look back on that young child now and go, God, she was very emotionally mature, because I was like, okay, I get it. I get that it's not safe, or I get that it's not suitable or whatever. And I took a lot of it in my stride, kind of like I'd be disappointed, but I didn't rail against it. And also, especially with school, I showed up to a lot of things that I couldn't participate in. And I now see that as much more of a confidence than anything, because I think it's really hard to just sit there and watch
At the
everyone
time,
else doing
it
it.
is really hard. And how did you think, what were the stories you told yourself then that now you're in retrospect realizing how strong that version of you was,
Well,
right?
like,
And there were stories that helped you
just
do it. Yeah, you
what
know.
I was thinking about yesterday was when I is a quick story. When I was in college, I joined this acting class, and I was
Oh, I
like
think this is a great story. I was going to
20 years
prompt you
old.
here. Yeah.
And
Okay.
I had never done an acting class, and I moved out of home, and I was very excited. I was like, okay, I'm gonna do something new, and it's gonna be great. And we're all gonna be doing it new, and it's gonna be great. And anyway, there was like a sheet and you put your name on it and whatever, and you signed up, and I checked where this building was, and I said to myself, knowing, I was like, okay, I gotta call these people up, because I don't know how accessible this building is. So I call up the organizer and I'm like, is this okay if I come? And she's like, oh no, this is up 2 flights of stairs and it's not going to work. And I said, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. And she said, no, no, but there's an advanced class. And I was like, first of all, I do not belong in the advanced class. And she was like, no, 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 it'll be great. It'll be great. Like, you can go to the advanced class and I explain it to the teacher and it'll be fine and you'll be part of it and great. And I was like, okay. And in my innocence, because I was like 20 years old, I thought I'll go along to this class and like she'll know that I've never done this before, and leave me alone. Essentially, that is not how that worked out. So I turn up to this class, and it's like it's a theater, right? So it's like circle shaped. And she said, now, she said, Laura, just go in the middle and put yourself right in the middle. And I was like, oh my God. So I go in and I'm in the middle, and she's like, this is center stage. And I was like, oh my God. And she's like, Laura can only be in this class because she can't be in the other one. And I would just like everybody to look at Laura for a minute and take that in. And I was like, oh, sweet God. And I remember just thinking, I'm about to prove that it is physically possible to die of embarrassment. I'm going to prove that it's possible to drop dead of embarrassment. I was like, oh my God. And so they did it for like 3 minutes as an exercise in the class. And I just thought, this is just awful. And I remember telling my roommate, and she was like, I would never go back. I would never go back to any of that class ever again. But I did go back. And I remember her saying to me, was that a bit much, Laura? And I was like 20 years old going, no, it's
Oh,
fine.
and then you
Totally
said
fine.
no.
Totally fine. I was like, this
So
is so. So I just had to sit there the whole time, but they were all like, yeah, this is our teachable moment. And I was like, I think I'm going to die of embarrassment. I think I'm going to die.
so your strength for courage was to maybe not make her uncomfortable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That so now I want to point that out as part of our superpowers.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the quiet stories that a lot of us tell is well, I'll just make sure no one else is uncomfortable here,
Yeah.
and I'll just absorb it. I would say I absorbed it with that kind of stuff with clenched teeth. I suspect you held your breath too much.
Absolutely. And I
Right.
what else I did
Yeah.
was go back and comfort her when I think about it. Because the following week I had to make sure she was okay about like how bad she felt that she did that afterwards. And I was like, I feel like I'm the teacher now. I was like, it's okay, don't worry about it. I'm fine. And she was like, I was like, this is not how I wanted this to work out. I just wanted to try something new. Like, it's like I'm
Right.
being put.
Exactly. And I want everyone, and I can only see some of the things popping up on my phone and the chats in the box, right? About how angry, like I'm horrified when you told me that. But see, I know you, and I was laughing with you yesterday. The line she said yesterday I loved so much was, I thought at that moment, fall through the floor down to the bottom,
Die.
like right through the floor, right? And where I'm
Don't
seeing the
worry,
things
if
come in
anyone
about
feels
how,
angry about it, I get a huge amount of entertainment out of it now. So it's fine. It
well,
really
that's
tickles
because
me now.
this is what I'm telling you about your stories for courage, right? The recognition, the recognition of really what that girl did. And we're all angry right now, right? Like I'm like, I can't freaking believe it, right?
I've had a
And
long
then the
time too.
move that we as a disability community want to call, like, yeah, and the fact that you want to take care of everyone else, right? As like, that's not fair, that's wrong for this society, it's her freaking problem. And I got that anger, right? I've got it too.
Yeah.
Except I also want us to know and feel that that was part of your superpower, that that story actually got you through it. So instead of just
Yeah.
feeling the outrage, which we all
No,
feel.
I don't feel outraged, but it's funny because one of the things is that I think is a superpower is soaking up other people's discomfort. I think
Yeah.
that is a gift that I'm like, listen, there, like, you're really uncomfortable right now, but I've absorbed it, like, you know what I mean?
And
I'm like,
and by
okay.
taking care of her, you're turning your position of vulnerability into a power position by taking care of her. My
Mhm.
point is the things we do that outrage us are also moves we've learned to make for courage and resilience.
Yeah.
And you're going to find in your own world of stories that there's a whole bunch of super sponge. I like that, right? There's a whole bunch of those double-edged stories that usually we process in terms of outrage. Like, I can't believe our society is
Yeah.
making us conform like this. When in fact, you take another layer out of that, off the top of that outrage, and holy shit, am I proud of that girl, Laura,
Yeah.
right? Like, I'm really like, not only did she just absorb, but now you laugh. So that things you absorbed, you now, that embarrassment's now laughter, how many years later, right?
Mhm.
Right? Like, this is all part of this stuff we know that
Yeah.
is really actually intuitively brilliant
I
on
think that
our own path,
it's
right?
like if you can, for me, it's like if you can get through the first part of discomfort. I really quite enjoyed that class as it went on. It was like, okay, I had to just like do the first 2 weeks and then everyone else was comfortable and we were fine. We moved on. But it
So,
was
so
right.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I got
Yes,
another layer of
you know,
this.
that's been part of it of like sometimes go into a new space and you have to absorb everybody else's projection of what that is and just sit there and try to contain that, and then it usually dissipates after a while, you know what I mean?
So, and then on top of it, I hope you did this, and I hope most people on the call, um, 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 hope this same thing. I hope that happened to you, and at least half the people in the room knew that that was really uncomfortable for you, and you absorbed a whole bunch of things and all that stuff. I hope you leveraged that into advantage as that
I
class
got the
went
lead
on.
in the play.
Okay, that's it. Exactly. The thing is, all this projection shit, I hope part of my superpower is you leverage the projection into your advantage.
I
And
got the
this is the
lead, and then I was
diabolical
like, all
part.
right, well, I'll
Yeah.
just be in the center of the stage, apparently. Okay. Yeah.
Right. And it's, I don't want to be diabolical about that, but often I'm like, oh, I'll just use that exactly to my advantage when I need to. Like, sometimes it just bugs me, but I don't want to just wear the fact that everyone was horrified for you and you had to soak all that up. You actually probably did have a different
Well,
role in that
for
class.
me, it's more like I didn't understand until later on that that was brave. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that was just like, I was like, oh, this is so embarrassing. I've just got to go home now. And now I go, oh, I don't know if I'd be able to do that now. Like, or like, I understand now later on that like being able to manage sitting there and managing what other people have about it is actually part of the courage of it, and you don't always have to do something. Sometimes just being there is enough. It's like Katia said, sometimes showing up is the work to do, you know.
I think You just you say that you're perfect. That you just have to keep showing up. And what if we could listen each other into our inherent bravery that we've already earned,
Yeah.
right? That would be one of the goals that I would like for this community that's growing, right? That like there's parts where we've been brave, not in the way the places that the people around us recognize, but this story, if you've been through any, it's a good story to matter whether you're disabled or not. And then there's a whole other level of the embarrassment and the humiliation that we know in our own DNA, in our own pores, what Laura was going through there. And so my appreciation of what she's turned this into is different, although, and so you can hear it too, than someone that's able-bodied, right? That we know what just happened in that transformation. And look how many years ago that you're probably 20 years ago or whatever.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So one more, and then we're gonna do something, and then I'll say, so Samantha, you're on the call because I see you writing in the chat, but I can't see the chat. So something about your story for courage, or a story for courage. There's by the way, you have multiple ones and they don't all have to make sense.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
No, I've had more as I listen to other people's stories. It's really inspiring just to, jostle my brain. Well, I started with one story I was thinking about, but in this conversation, I was thinking my mother used to, how families, they tell stories about you, like when you were little, all the stuff you don't remember. And there's, you have a personal mythology that you grow up with. They're like, well, when you were little, you always did this. And then you kind of highly relate to that thing, even if you don't remember that thing, but you're like, oh, I guess I'm that, whatever that is. So one part of my mythology was that the first sentence I ever said was, do it myself. Yeah, which pretty much sums me up, actually. And so as I became disabled, the hardest thing for me was asking for help. And, I just really, really, really sucked at it. To the point that it was really problematic. And it's problematic because my friend, like what I learned, the sort of story that helped me eventually is something happened and I didn't ask for help. And I was telling one of my best friends about whatever it was that happened. And she's like she's a poet, and she's like the most like gentle, loving, nurturing person you can imagine. And she listened to me talk about this thing that I had struggled through on my own. And she said, she paused and she said, what the fuck? She said, what the fuck? She's like, I am right across the street. Why didn't you call me? And it was in that moment, because it really took me by surprise. And it was really in that moment that I realized that it was okay to ask for help. I realized that the people around me were all standing by, like waiting for me to wake up to the fact that I needed help and that I could trust them, and that she was so offended that I didn't trust her enough to ask for help, that it made me reframe how I thought about asking for help. And it changed my life. And ever since then, like, I have worked on it. And now I am so good at asking for help. I am amazing for asking for help. I ask complete strangers, and I have no problem accepting help. I like to travel. I used to like to travel before COVID. And I was in this little European town, and there was like a bridge over a canal. And I was in like a shitty little wheelchair, and I was like trying really hard to get up this little bridge, and it was not going well. And out of nowhere, someone just came up behind me and pushed me to the top of the bridge and kept on walking. Like they didn't even say anything to me. It was almost like it was choreographed. And it was this sort of beautiful moment. And over again, what I have discovered with my disability is, particularly when I'm traveling, is it's allowed me to see the good in other people. And I have realized how I have been the recipient of so many lovely acts of kindness that I would not have been aware of or experienced if I hadn't been open to help. If I hadn't learned to ask for help, accept help, and see those gifts for what they are. So
That's
that's
awesome.
that's kind of my, I mean, I actually started from a different place and thinking about the storytelling, and I'm totally making this up as I go along. So you're getting
That's
a
the
train
best
of,
kind.
but
That's the best kind.
yeah, I think, it's that idea of the other half of that would be, I interviewed a long time ago, I wrote a book, and one of the people I interviewed was 102 when I interviewed him. And his like life mantra was problems are opportunities. And that's what I tell myself day in and day out. It's like problems are opportunities. So yeah, I have this problem, but I can translate what can I learn from it? What can I get from this?
Oh,
That his
and
story translated to that for me.
that realization that not only do people want, and are most people at least want to offer help, right? That's part of the power of realizing, when you realize that help is something you shouldn't be ashamed for, right? That it's actually part of your control of a situation, is to actually be able to ask for help,
But
right? That all of a sudden, yeah, go ahead.
he was very ashamed, he was very ashamed of his disability, and we had to keep it a secret, and there was he struggled through so much, and the way he handled it was, I had to consciously not handle it the way he handled it from the way I wanted to handle
Exactly.
it. We had to kind of go, I had to develop my own stories, in a sense, because the stories I was being told weren't helpful.
Well, that's part of what for me, was also stories about my body, right? Like, can you tell a veil? Are you sure you're not being deceived a little bit? And I feel like, because of under realized awareness of the energetic manifestation of human being, that the medical model that I was encountering wasn't wrong. It was limited. And they were missing part of what I was and who I was. And that although in the beginning part of doing yoga, it was going to be hard and I was going to be frustrated, right? That there was flowers above, right? So what I'd like to do here is take you either can take a break before we come back. And this is one of those ones, damn it, I know I'm supposed to teach yoga, but this seems like we're right on the edge of a whole bunch of really good stories. But what I'd like everyone to do, take a 5-minute break, or jot down for 5 minutes a couple of phrases that has given you courage, and write them in the chat, right? Because I don't know about you, that already in those 3 stories, I'm learning things about my own story, right? And my own stories. So let's do that. So what I want to do, I'm looking at the time now. I want to come back to the after hours to be more sharing of different stories for courage. I'd like to teach some yoga here for a little bit, right? And then continue the after hours, because I think that is important. What for me is really important about what the MBS community does for each other, the adaptive yoga community, is that we include our bodies and stuff, right? That a lot of the support and the company that we get is also got a body piece always. So I'm going to teach for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then the after hours will be the stuff that's in the chat box and anyone that can stay. But I want to honor people's time that only had till 2:30. So sit up straight and tall. So the ability to differentiate different parts of your experience is not dissimilar to differentiating your stories that give you courage, right? And I know that sounds strange, but like already, like in the exchange with Katya, when she's saying things, I say, so what's the story you tell to everyone else? And then what's the other story? When it comes to human sensation, right? And I like that Samantha, I like how you started with one story, but then decided in the course of listening that you had another one, right? I'll never forget when I learned that. It was when Krista Tippett on Being asked me the first question in the interview in 2007. She said, and I answered something about why I do yoga at first, and then she said, okay, that's great, but now tell me the real story. So with some of your stories of courage that you're used to saying outwardly, right? They're not the actual depth of the story. So there's a part of discovery that are not the lines you actually use to yourself all the time, but there's a discovery piece. And I find that very much similar to a yoga practice. That there's a discovery occurring when you realize how to integrate and what focus is. So as you sit up straight and tall, just different sensations, right? Because remember, part of your stories for courage maybe haven't been revised since, I don't know, 1994. I don't know, like that, like as I sit up all the time, and then all of a sudden the fact that I can sit differently, feel my sitting bones and my feet differentiate between the two, right? And lift my chest. So as I slump, everyone slump again, register the vehicle, which is the put your feet on the ground, feel your sitting bones lift up, but differentiate that from the sensation change, right? So as you sit up straight and tall, lift your chest and do what's more akin to centering. What's the sensation change, right? Not just that you're doing the things you're doing, right? So now for a second, like, and I've been taught the class I just taught on Monday, that's online if you want to watch it. There are two of them, and I've been going bizarro, right? But like, I've been trying to teach about the sensation difference between feeling your skin and feeling your bones. Okay. Now it's like, what? That's like saying, I don't even know what that means, So push down right now on your knees. So I'm trying to, I can't see what, sorry for the F-bomb. I think you can see that. Everyone pushing on your knees. Articulate your femur bone back into your hip socket if you can. And then, of course, when you do that, there's going to be a lift in your chest, right? So, and then don't push it on your knees. And then feel the sensation change when there's reference on a bone and a lift in your chest. So we're starting with bone energy here, right? It's like, wait, oh, that's kind of deeper, right? And I talked to, that last class was called more yoga about skin and bones or something. I don't know what we're going to call it, but like getting the difference in sensation. So, right. And then I want you to like sit here and then feel what the bone stuff. So for me to feel my bones, I've got certain things, just like you're going to have certain stories that I'm going to do and feel different parts of myself with different things. So I'm pushing it on my femur bones this way. So this is Tadasana, right? But I know that this is a check-in, right? This is a check-in position for me, where all of a sudden, when I push in on my femur bones and bring my knees close together, I know this, all this stuff I know from yoga, but this is like okay, right? And I don't know if this works for you. I don't even know if this works for you. unlikely my stories for courage are going to be your stories for courage, right? It's about you figuring out sensation differences that persist over time. I'm not exactly sure how Samantha hears problems present opportunities, but what would that look like if it got into my body, as opposed to like thinking it just in my head? So I'd have to work on that being a great story for me, right? And then I want to take up space. So take your legs wide. So what's already the difference between keeping your knees together and keeping your legs wide? Well, the simple story is my legs are wide and they're not closer together. So then what's the real story? What's the sensation story? What happens when my base spreads out? Is my balance increasing? I think so. If I'm honest, when my legs are like this, so bring your legs back together, I'm more wobbly up here because of my scoliosis, because I'm paralyzed from my chest down, right? It's not just that my legs are wide, something transforms, right? When my legs are wide, my base widens, and suddenly each side of my chest is more available to me. Now, do I lose something? Absolutely. Not every problem's an opportunity, right? Like some problems just suck, right? Except probably there's an opportunity if you work hard enough at it, right? But so I do lose something when I'm not in my midline, go back together. So have you really started to try to learn how to surround your own midline? Tadasana, mountain pose, is a surrounding of the midline of your spine and getting it to go through down to your feet to the earth and back up to the sky, right? So this midline pose has a certain sensation. Take your legs wide again. This isn't the same type of midline pose. The midline has changed. If you really want to bake your noodle, did it change? I'm not so sure. I'm not sure about that, but let's just say it does change. Because on the superficial story, my legs are no longer together and my feet are no longer on my pedals. So into this base, I'm going to change gravity. And I'm going to watch. Like, so when I go over, I'm pushing down and like, when I go this way, I can get the sense of hitting down through my heel better, right? So I'm going to not only just lean on my leg, I'm going to try to go, I'm going to push down through my heel, and I'm going to lift my rib cage because I know my diaphragm controls my subtle body, right? So I'm not going to overdo it, but I'm going to push down with my will. I'm going to open my rib cage, lift my chest and inhale. And holy crimes, I've got the beginning core of a whole bunch of standing poses. Good, and then release. If you come to my class on Mondays, you know that I do this a lot because I'm trying to show you standing poses a lot, right? So I'm gonna go, gonna lean over and engage my will because this helps my mind, right? Damn it, I get to do something. I get to say something. I get to feel something. Then I'm gonna figure out how to activate my rib cage, prepare it for the subtlety of my breath, right? Feel down to my heel. I'm going to push down through my heel and I'm going to connect that to my expanding rib cage. I'm going to breathe and I'm going to feel light and strong. Good, and then release. I'm going to find my midline again, legs together, because I don't want to do a pose without my midline. I don't know about you, but I like feeling my midline on exhalation. Right? There's a lot of parts to the story, a lot of original detail. Right? So now I'm going to go over again. My will, my opening, down through my heel, through more moon energy, more sunlight energy here. What kind of weird details am I working now into this story? I don't know, but I'm giving you sensation differences. And then I'm going to take my arm up. And now I'm going to go, wait, there's a back body of this pose, I'm not in control of this whole pose. What if, like getting back to the Zeropa song, uncertainty is part of my guide? I don't know exactly what my back body does, except I like it. Why do I like it? Because it feels good. Good, and then go the other way. I come forward here to re-find my feet on the ground because I want that sensation of grounding because I just went skyward, right? So I'm going to know I want to go back to earth in almost every yoga practice I have, from earth to sky, sky to earth, in and out, right? And then over, grounding, again, hitting down my will, even though I can't push physically through my heel, right? Except I can. If I get my abdomen, my diaphragm kind of right, and I start to open my chest, and then here comes what people think the outer story of Trikonasana, they think is the upper arm. So beginners often overdo this arm and they don't work their legs enough, right? And I'm going to go down and expand and breathe. Good. And then I'm going to come back to the midline. So, and I'm going to find a version of my self story that happens at my midline. Before I'm trying to engage the world, before I'm trying to engage a pose that throws me off balance and threatens me, I'm going to always know how to touch my midline. I'm going to figure out what the sensation difference is between expansion with my legs wide, arms wide this time. What's the sensation? Because when I speak into the world, I am expanding. But remember, every expansion of speech takes exhalation in air. So it's taking something from you, something's descending as you speak, and you're expanding outward through words. So I'm going to start going, hey, I can expand with but I don't want to just dissipate. I want to know where my midline is, right? So I'm expansive on one part of the pose, and I'm going to go back to my midline and go, okay, here's the part that the world doesn't see in my pose. It's where the drama is. And probably my own mind gets bored with my midline pose. That's why we don't necessarily know our own stories of courage. They seem so obvious. We don't quite know. We have to actually discover the story of your midline before you expand, right? And then take your legs wide again. But now I want to take my midline and have it part of the expansive pose and take my arms wide. So it's way physically harder for me to feel the midline pose of Tadasana. But I'm going to try to be expanded. Turns out the midline pose of this pose for me is to feel the energy of my shoulder blades and connect it to my sitting bones, and then rise back up my side body as I go down in the pose. So I'm finding my inner story in an outer expression and not just feeling vulnerable and exposed, right? Because I'm working on multiple levels of story in this asana. Breathe. Good, and then release. Bring your midline back to your story. What's great is that the midline of your story base doesn't have to be articulable. You just need to know it, right? You just need to know where the center of every pose is, right? As a sensation, right? Okay, so one of the things I also wanted to try to do, I'm trying to layer in some combination of a whole bunch of stuff right here in a short amount of time. I love this story, and I hated it for a long time, but now I'm loving it. When the yogis would try to talk about just the elements, earth, um, sky, earth, air, water, and fire, right? As 4 parts of a story. And then they combine it into 4 parts of asana and expression too, right? So the ability to delineate, right, between different elements in the happening, right? So the midline is part of the happening for sure. The expansion is part of the happening, but now we're going to try to like differentiate different sensations. So, okay, so the bones would be a little bit more like they pushed on the bones more like the earth, right? So just for a second, what would it feel like to have water in your torso? Which you have water in your torso, by the way, right? That's where a lot of it happens. That's why the yogis talk about the water being in the torso. So now think about that kind of feeling. So now, like just for a second now, and they usually try to get in Shavasana. I've taught this Shavasana a lot before. There's air in your head. Okay, so what the hell? Everyone, do something weird. Feel the air inside your head. One of the ways to feel air is to be aware of space without space being emptiness. Let it be air. Air is a form of strength, right? It just takes you away from self a little bit. It moves you skyward too fast. So you got to be careful of too much air, right? But like, so there's air. And so with earth, let's try to go, put your hands together. I've been doing this a lot lately in class. I'm going to connect my bones to find earth, right? So my all of a sudden, and as soon as I do this, I feel, poof, I go down. Does anyone else go down? And then I can lift up and find more air, right? So now I've got earth, got air. What I've been working on in my practice is water. I know how to have fire. I know how to push my hands together too hard. I know how to push down through my heel too hard, right? But if I go earth, do to get a sense of water, of movement and flow. And then I've already given you a hint that the yogis think it might be more in the torso, which would be literally true because of digestion, right? So now you're trying to go, huh? And then fire, make it into something. Make it a full pose. But with your will, can you let it be water too? Can you let the potential of emptiness and air be with the water and the grounding of the earth? What are you talking about, you crazy yogi? Right? I don't know. I think you kind of know what I'm talking about. If you start differentiating where your midline is, where expansion is, and what goes into expansion, if you can't have the earth help you expand, you're gonna need water, right? You can reach. So let's go back to a yoga pose for a second. You can reach to the air, right? But if I get too caught up with how far I reach, I'm going to overwill. How do I keep earth? Take your arm wide, right? How do I keep earth? Feel the air. But now the hard thing is, can I feel the air inside my earth? Because by the way, earth's got air in the dirt. Now, what would water feel like? And how should that temper my fire or my will? And then come on back, I suspect that often when our stories for courage become too angry, we're thinking that fire is the only way it delivers, right? I'm thinking maybe it should be water, right? What am I even talking about? I don't know. See if this story can work for you, right? Where I got earth, I got air, hope, and freedom here. I'm not letting it be empty. I'm letting it be fluid. And with all of those layers of sensation, I'm going to apply my will and let the other elements temper the fire so I don't lapse into violence. And breathe. And then come on back to center. The ability to discriminate different parts of your body, the ability to know that your stories has evolved over time, your poses evolve over time, the fact that you can differentiate, and I just try to do these 4, which are actually pretty hard until you open your mind to them, right? That like there are ways to differentiate. And when you start seeing and going to the next layer of story in your asana, like, yes, there's an obvious sensation when my legs are together, and there's an obvious sensation when they're wide. And then if I sit there and listen, more things are changing than I know. The discipline to discriminate different sensations are one of the most important ways to find to widen your repertoire of your stories, right? And don't judge your poses too fast. Your poses suck at first, right? You try a new pose, they're not so great. Some days are better than others. Some days you tell better stories than others, right? Don't be in a rush with stories for courage, right? But find where the midline is and study the different ways it can expand. Because that's what every yoga was. And then once your poses expand, once I get more sky in my pose, I can find more earth. That it turns out that there's a continuous feedback between those levels of sensation. Now, am I thinking all this crap when I'm doing my yoga practice? No, I'm telling you a story right now. Right? And so you can find yourself in the story, so you can find your own version of the importance of your midline and how that gives you courage to try things outwardly, what the sensation of balance means. All these things. Come on, as you know, I think your yoga practice is not just a drop in the ocean. It's the entire ocean in a drop. All right, well, I'm 6 minutes after. That was quite a download. I just said a lot. You know, watch that on recording if it sung to you at all. If it didn't sing to you at all and you just thought I'm a whack-a-mole, that's fine. I'm okay with that. You know why? I know where my earth is, right? I actually know where my midline is. And I know my midline isn't just compressed rock. It's got air in it. It's got water. My boundary has a whole bunch of sensations in it. So the girl, Laura, that absorbed the humiliation didn't fully know all the ways that she could distribute that energy and let it go through her. She's doing it now as she tells the story and laughs. She laughs and knows she got the lead in the play. She's figured out how that story evolved from that initial imprint. That was a remarkable story, right? The story of Samantha's first utterance, right? Being what she now sees as a defining moment in her life, right? or a maxim that I can do it myself. And then she realized it as a weakness. And then it became a superpower again. That's our stories of courage need to keep evolving. I'm in a whole big transformation of my stories right now. That's for a whole other day. And probably that would bore you to death. The transformation of my stories, because they're mine. All right, everybody. That wraps up for me one of the most difficult yoga disability and transformation, just gave me technological issues on my end, right? But I hope you got something out of it. And I'm going to stay on after here because I'd love to hear some of the things that went into the chat box. If you're ready to talk a little bit, you don't have to tell a whole long story. You can just say, here's the line that it came down to, or here's the beginning of what I know is a whole process of discovery, right? Because there's a process of discovery in every line of your stories for courage. Stories for courage are a beginning, not an ending, right? All right, be an explorer. For me, that means be the wolf that goes help for the pack. I don't know what your story is, right? Find your own. All right, hands together and we'll stay for after. Namaste. The spirit in me bows to the spirit in you.